Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is Accommodating Staff as Your Business Reopens, presented by the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. My name is Alison Mitchell, and I'm part of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce team. Before we start our webinar, there are a few housekeeping items that I would like to share. Your microphones should be muted, but please ensure that they are to ensure that we reduce background noise. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar, and you can do so by typing your questions into the questions box in your control panel. Our presenters will be answering the questions at the end of their webinar. Following today's webinar, all webinar registrants will be sent a follow-up email with a link of today's recording. Our presenters today from the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work are Kathleen MacLeod, who is an employee facilitator for partner programs, Danielle Shantz, who is a job developer partners program, and Melissa Silva, job developer partners program. We are also making today's webinar as accessible as possible. We have two ASL interpreters with us, Karen and Leslie, who will be joining us today, and they'll be switching out every 15 minutes. I would now like to invite Kathleen to begin the presentation.
Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar. We're happy to be here to talk with you about accommodating your staff as your business reopens. For those that don't know, CCRW Kitchener location has been open to the public for 6 years, and we are located at 127 Victoria Street South. CCRW's mission is to promote and support meaningful, long-term, and equitable employment of people with disabilities. We are a free, federally funded employment service, and we support businesses in becoming more accessible and to secure the talents of persons with disabilities. We provide a range of services for employers and candidates to educate about inclusion and support our candidates successfully. Some of those services include financial supports, such as access to occupational therapist assessments. So the two that we provide are occupational skills assessments and workplace accommodation assessments. These can also result in accommodation equipment. So the occupational therapist could request equipment that then gets purchased on behalf of the employee and becomes their property. They can take that specific equipment they need throughout their career so that employers will not be required to purchase that on their behalf. We also provide wage subsidies that are 10 weeks in length. The first 6 weeks is 100% covered, and the last 4 weeks are 50% covered for eligible candidates that meet our funding criteria with the federal government. We also provide recruitment and onboarding supports. Our staff can create inclusive job postings that, so they'll talk with your staff about the job and create a job description and job posting that will be inclusive. We can also provide accommodation plans, working with employees to determine their specific modifications that they would need. We can provide supported job interviews, so we can assist employees with job interview prep, as well as attend the interview to support and advocate for employees. And we can provide job coaching. So we can provide a job coach to go on site and support the employees during the beginning of their training to allow them to have one-on-one time to ask questions and learn. We also provide training, industry-specific training for employees. So we can fund up to $500 of industry-specific training for employees before they get hired, as well as after they're hired. And we can provide training for disability training for employers on specific topics such as learning disabilities, mental health, accommodations, inclusive hiring practices, and so much more. We can also answer any CCRW specific questions later if you have any. But now we're going to go on to the rest of the presentation to talk about accommodations in the workplace.
So disclosure is the process of workers revealing their disability to employers. Disclosure is a personal choice and it is not legally required. So some tips for the employers: ensure you have an open door policy where individuals feel comfortable approaching you and discussing their disability and any accommodation needs. Be open to having a flexible work environment, making any modification in terms of, start times, end times, be open to remote working, as well confidentiality. Ensure that the employees are comfortable with any information they provide to you staying with you and being kept confidential. Accommodations are only for those, they're not only for those with a disability. There are many types of accommodations. There are hard accommodations such as ergonomic furniture, accessories, assistive devices, assistive technologies, as well as soft accommodations such as flexible hours or breaks, working remotely, providing constant feedback, creating task lists, job carving, or customization. So the accommodation roles and responsibility of the employer: ensure the employees know their right to accommodations. Ensure that you do grant accommodation requests in a timely, reasonable manner to the point of undue hardship. Refer to the experts. If you're unsure of how to navigate through these types of situations, reach out to a designated HR professional or a health and safety specialist. As well, CCRW do offer OSA and JAS, where we can actually have an OT come out on site to the work environment and look at the workspace and evaluate and suggest proper modifications for the individuals. Again, confidentiality is big. Be sure the individual feels comfortable approaching you. And again, be flexible to change the accommodations throughout the process. Situations may change, as well as the modifications may need to be adjusted or altered. So be open to that. As well, document all accommodation details throughout the process. So you do have a documentation trail about the situations that have transpired.
So return on investment. So here is all the good stuff. Your investment as an employer is in your employees. So making sure that they have all the tools that they need in order to work as efficiently as possible. This is what is crucial, right, to your business's success. So now, more than ever, we can all agree through COVID, people need to feel safe and accommodated. So I want to say congratulations to everyone right now who's in attendance on this webinar, because you've already taken an active role by being here today. You've decided to show some interest in accommodation. So it's simple. When you listen to your employees' needs and then in turn provide those accommodations for them, your business will reap the benefits of your investment. So if you provide these accommodations, a few things will happen. You'll create a culture for your employees of inclusivity. And all that means is that everyone feels accepted. So you created an environment where employees are taken care of, will in turn increase the reputation of your business, which is what ultimately you want. So put simply, if your employees feel comfortable, they'll be happy, therefore loyal, and of course your business is going to be well known in a positive way in the community. People will want to work for you. They will seek you out. So there's good news. We at CCRW, we're here to tell you today, you do not need to be an expert on anything other than your business. Our business at CCRW is to identify and accommodate your needs, which is done in a few different ways. You've met Kathleen, our employment facilitator, at the top of the presentation. She's the one who's going to discover all the employees' skills, prepare them, have everything they need in order to work to the best of their ability. While on the other side, Melissa and myself are job developers. So we will analyze then the employer side, the employer needs, and I'm talking again about needs such as hard and soft accommodations, like your physical workspace, if it's accessible, flex time, working remotely, and through this dual approach and this complete, thorough approach, everyone is being secured and having the most effective accommodations. This allows for the best partnering, employees and employer. So remember why we're doing this. It will increase your productivity. So let us at CCRW do the work for you. On top of that, if your employees feel heard, everybody wants to feel heard. They can perform their tasks easier. Their morale will soar, and you'll experience less absences, right? Less sick days will be claimed, win-win. So bottom line, if everyone is happy and healthy and supported, you'll have increased employee retention, which in turn increases your profitability. So that's the bottom line. Less time spent on, for you as an employer, interviewing, retaining staff, and more on your business, the business itself. So next slide, please. The main takeaway. Let's recap. Let's reiterate your role as an employer. The duty to accommodate for an employer exists when and only when the employee makes their needs known. So having said that, remember way back to just that last slide, those are the wonderful benefits. For you as a business owner, once an employee's disability is accommodated, so there are many benefits. Once accommodations are in place, it's the best case scenario having an employee disclose their disability and their needs to you. It's a good thing. You fostering an open environment allows those employees to feel comfortable to disclose whatever disability they may have. Also, an employee can disclose their disability at any time during their employment. So this is important to note. It doesn't need to be only upon hiring. An employee doesn't have one shot at disclosing. So even now, all of your returning staff who are existing staff before have that opportunity to disclose a disability to you. Make them aware of that opportunity. A good practice would be to review all the existing supports with your staff that you currently have available to them. So an EAP support, flex time that's already been made available. It could be allowing your employees to work remotely, or others that Melissa had mentioned earlier. And this will reassure your employees you are already offering accommodations. You have accommodations in place. So every accommodation plan that CCRW would be making for you and for an employee is individualized. No two plans are the same. And that's because no two people are the same. So tailoring those supports ensures success. So again, that's on the CCRW side. We are here to help you with that in making these accommodation plans. We can perform the assessments. We create and help you implement those accommodation plans. The important thing for you to know and the takeaway from today is just to have a plan, just to have the plan. So nothing breeds fear and assumptions than the absence of information. So communicating that with your staff is crucial. Just letting them know you're working on a plan and when to expect some updates will alleviate all kinds of anxiety. So it's worthy to note the accommodation plans, however, once made, can change. They're ever changing. This is based on how an employee is feeling, what needs come up. So as an employer, best practice is to be flexible, allowing for those accommodation plans to change as the needs of the employee changes. So especially now during COVID-19, some areas that we are seeing on our side at CCRW needing addressed are, just for a couple examples for you, could be employees' hours that need a little bit of modification, and that can be for a number of reasons. Could be due to changes in childcare availability. And it could be looking at ways to increase your employees' comfortability, even with their co-workers, which never existed before now, or their work environment itself. So providing resources to make your workplace safe and productive is key. So finally, on this slide here, the takeaway again is accommodations involve the cooperation of both employer and employee jointly. You both have a role to play in order to make this a successful working relationship. So again, CCRW can help with what you say and how you say it, making these conversations easy, more understandable. We do lunch and learns might be possible, a very doable option. It can be right out of the box thinking. No one expects you to be an expert on these new guidelines. CCRW is here to help you with that. So the good news is you can start today. You can be proactive, even before your employees return, even before an employee discloses a disability to you. CCRW can come and learn exactly what your unique business needs are and get you prepared. So, speaking about being prepared, we'd like to start today with offering you a free gift. We want to make this transition back to work for you now and forever smoother. And some of the gems that we're going to offer you in this training include language that you can use, strategies to help you navigate through your very specific scenarios that might arise in your workplace. And there's lots of helpful resources and much more. So this is an online training. It takes 1 hour of your time, which could save you hundreds of hours and dollars in frustration and with rehiring. The training gives you concrete steps in order to conduct your business in a way by reaping the benefits of working with an untapped talent pool of candidates. And remember, disabilities are what will be being disclosed to you. When your employees are returning to your workplace, some of these disabilities might not be obvious to you, and so you have to consider that you might not be aware of them from past employees and then when you start rehiring. So this training will allow really some information and to make you more comfortable with dealing with those scenarios. So the chamber, just a bit of housekeeping here, the chamber will include this voucher in the follow-up email to you with instructions on how to access this and to get going with your first steps in becoming an inclusive employer. If you think you're knowledgeable already in this area, why not just take, it's 60 minutes just to brush up on some of the latest terminology, how to be accommodating, really not a lot to lose here. So please take note of our contact information and reach out with any questions that you might have after this presentation when you're thinking that you should have asked something and it will come to you later. Kathleen MacLeod is our seasoned employment facilitator. I'll just let you know really where to direct some of your questions here. She is the expert with candidate intakes and pre-screening, that hidden talent pool. She's the one to reach out to in order to get an employee started in our assessment process and implement the accommodations needed. Again, on that other side of job developers, there's Melissa Silva. She is an experienced job developer with a passion for people and extensive knowledge in matching the right talent with the unique needs of the employer. She has a very long, rich history in employer-employee matching, and she has solid community connections. They are extensive. And myself, a job developer as well, I am here to listen to your business needs and connect you with the best solutions. Any out-of-the-box thinking for your long-term success. I have extensive background in working the disability field, and that's equipped me to do a good job at CCRW in helping you. So that in a nutshell is our presentation. We would love to answer it, open it up now and answer any of your questions that you might have.
Great, thanks so much, Danielle and Melissa and Kathleen. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box in your control panel and we will do questions now. So the first question that we have is, do we need to make accommodation plan based on information from an employee, or can we ask for medical documentation or recommendation?
Hi. In a situation like that, if we could have the individual connect with us directly, we could talk about having one of our OTs go to the work site and help put in the accommodations or any suggestions they have for that work site. We could actually have the OT go on site and evaluate the workspace.
Okay. Another question, do you have some examples of accommodating employees with anxiety following them returning from being off during COVID-19? Currently, there's a plan that's a gradual return to work, but he's looking for any other mental health tips that might be helpful.
In a situation like that, definitely more frequent check-ins with the employee. So ensure the employee is comfortable to reach out, even more frequent breaks, you know, even just to get up and walk around, you know, for 5 minutes, you know, small things like that, but ensure the individual does know that you have the listening ears on and you are open to having them come up to you if there is a situation at work. But I would start with the breaks, more frequent breaks.
I think it's also important that you ask the individual themselves, because a lot of the times they do know what will help alleviate their own mental health. And if they don't know, then that's something that you can refer them to counseling. You can refer them to the EAP program. But a lot of people, they have a basic knowledge of what might help them be more successful on the job. So that's the first place you should go to.
And just remember, reach out to us. If you have very specific questions, and I know it's difficult at this platform now to have confidentiality, and so if you want to reach out so that we can go through some of these questions and really specifics and dive in so that privacy is protected, please do so. We have extensive resources that we can pass on to you, other COVID specific resources that we can send along. We can do that via email or over the phone. And we've been, again, meeting virtually with a lot of folks. So please reach out and we can discuss specifics for sure to answer all your questions.
Okay, great. So a clarifying question. In your presentation, you've referred to employees disclosing a disability, and then you gave an example of some accommodations that employers may have to consider upon returning to work after COVID, and one of the examples you used was childcare. So the question is around, do requests for accommodations have to be due to a disability that's diagnosed by a medical professional, or is self-disclosure okay?
So our program specifically does not require any medical documentation whatsoever. Self-disclosure is if you're going to, again, join and want some support through CCRW and our services, it's self-disclosure only. And that can be enough to get involved with all of our accommodation and supports. And again, we have to talk about disability, which is huge. Disability could be any sort of accommodation at all. It could be for anxiety. It could be for recurring headaches, where any accommodation is needed. So that can be, we have listed some of the common ones right now. Currently with COVID, yes, mental wellness, yes, anxiety, and then for sure with those changing needs of childcare and the home-work blend, something like needing accommodation for your home situation right now, but also just in your workplace. If it is something with a mental wellness, you do not for CCRW need that medical documentation, just self-disclosure. Again, please reach out if there's something specific. We can make sure that we get everything addressed.
Okay, great. Another question, what would your recommendation be for an employee returning on a gradual basis following a medical leave of 6+ months from a brain injury?
I would recommend us having our OT come on site and look at the situation of the employee, see what the employee is capable of doing, and going from there, really.
Yeah, once again, I had mentioned, I think that no two accommodations plans are the same. So brain injury you're going to have many medical practitioners that are backing that situation, who have been involved and currently involved now and will be involved with that back to work. That I would guarantee that work situation and those duties are going to probably 100% be different, and everything will be analyzed there. So we do need to be in joint communication with all the other recommendations that are medical there and what the capabilities are. So no two brain injuries or diagnoses are the same either. And we'll have to look at that on an individual basis for sure.
Okay, thanks. Can you maybe provide some employers on guidance, if they have an employee that comes to them with a request for accommodation, and they're now aware that they can reach out to you for assistance, but during that initial conversation that they're having with the employee, what type of information can they ask from the employee in order to really understand the type of accommodation while still respecting the employee's privacy?
Well, it really is up to, with three of us, it's hard to know who's going to jump in when. But it really is up to that person to disclose the amount of information that they're comfortable with. So I would ask a very broad information, and if they're willing to share in those broad kind of questioning pieces, then let them kind of guide the conversation. There are specific things that are individual, that are unique to each person. But if someone has disclosed a specific disability, AskJan.org is a really good resource. If you want to know some more very basic general accommodations that might be needed, if they're showing that they're having some issues with identifying what they might need, and then you can ask specific questions like, do you have issues with memory, or do you have issues with organization? And then there's tips and different accommodations in those that will pull out based on the type of disability that they disclose.
Okay, thanks. Can you maybe walk us through, if an employer reaches out to you for assistance, and I'm sure that the process is probably a little bit different based on whatever question they're reaching out to you, but, if they have an employee come to them with an accommodation request and they reach out to you for guidance, what then happens from there? You've mentioned an OT going on site to do an assessment. How long do you have a relationship with the employer for a certain situation?
So we have, sorry, Danielle, go ahead. So there's no really time frame in terms of, I mean, we want our employer relationships to last as long as possible. I mean, we're there to support that employer until everything is set up for the employee and for the business. So as long as it takes, we're there to support. Usually if we connect with, we put a request in to have an OT come on site, I mean, that could be, you know, 1 to 2 weeks. But again, we could go out to the employer site, have a conversation, get some background history, and just try to get a bigger picture. And then we could work together to build the accommodations and modifications that the employee needs.
Okay, thanks. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, please put it in the questions box. The last question that I have so far is, you mentioned during the presentation that you do lunch and learns. Can you maybe expand on the types of topics that you cover, how long the lunch and learns are? Are those available at no cost to employees? I'm not sure who wants to answer that one.
I can. So they are completely free and they are based on your needs. So if you are finding that there's a specific disability that you want you and your supervisor or management staff to know more about, then you can reach out to us and we can curate a lunch and learn specifically for what you would like to learn about. We can also provide things about inclusive hiring practices. We can include things on AODA training. It really is just what you need in your organization right now surrounding disability and inclusion. We can work with you specifically to find what you might want us to talk to you about.
Okay, great. We have another question that's come in. You mentioned earlier that breaks could be a good strategy for an accommodation. So if breaks are a good strategy for a return to work plan, then are the breaks paid? Do you know that?
Something like that. It would depend on the company. I mean, some companies would choose to say, you know what, for the 5 minutes, it's fine. And other companies would deduct. So, I mean, that's based on the employer's decision, whether they choose to pay for those extra breaks or not.
Okay, great.
May I add one thing to that response?
Sure.
And just to remind you to take a different lens here on accommodations, and remember that I was saying about return on investment. And so the investment is in your employees, right? So if we are talking about the time as an employer that you're spending that on rehiring, retraining, and retaining your employees. If you allow for, instead of looking at, I have to give a free break now, by allowing that employee to have extra time off that is for free to me, if that is giving them just the ease in that hour, 5 minutes within that hour, just to decrease the anxiety and to give them a little bit more time to be productive for you. And that's what they need right now, based on whatever disability that they've disclosed or need for accommodation in their duties. That is ultimately going to be more productivity. And again, with those happier employees that are working for you, that 5 minutes might actually be priceless for you. And so to work on that, like I said, that it's not going to be this cookie cutter accommodation that you're going to now give a plan for this blanket for your business overall, but it's going to be tailored per employee and what their needs are. So again, if it's that break, as just one suggestion, right? If I'm finding that I'm really returning to work, but it's heavy for me, just giving that break, that's something that's nice and easy, and it is for free. However, it's going to end up with, wonderful success on the other end. that is one example. And like I said, we can come and discuss all kinds of accommodation plans for you. And even just working with you to have maybe a call between an employer and us just to run through some of the needs and to get some suggestions on what accommodation strategies can be to really work with. If breaks and time is not something that can be accommodated, there might be actually something else that we can do, flexible duties in that way. So to think of it instead of a lack is actually giving something so small and easy that can result in something very productive. Different way of looking at it.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have come to the end of our questions. So I would like to thank our presenters, Kathleen, Danielle, and Melissa, as well as our ASL interpreters today, Karen and Leslie, for being with us. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and your time today. To our attendees, as I mentioned, you will receive a follow-up email that will have a copy of today's presentation as well as a link to today's webinar recording. And again, thank you once again to our presenters, Kathleen, Danielle, and Melissa. Have a great day.